Okay, welcome back. It's actually the 1st of June, so this May project should have been finished by now. But this is me trying to finish off the artwork. Up in the top right hand corner you can see Henri Rousseau's original painting, The Dream from 1910. And what I've done is I've taken a white pastel pencil from this set here by Derwent. That's their pastel pencil collection. I've taken a white and I've kind of mapped out where I would like my foliage forms to go. And they are almost in reverse order from the image that you can see up in the top right hand corner. Okay, so I'm just going to get stuck in with painting. You'll see that the mix is cleaned up, and it's about 50-50 water and water soluble linseed oil. So I'm going to go in with my darks first. I have Viridian here, and I need to darken that a little bit more, so I'll take some French ultramarine and see if I can create some darks, some dark greens, maybe a little tad yellow, maybe a little bit more green. And that consistency is lovely. Very nice. So I'm using a Daler Rowney filbert pencil brush to do my mixing. But my application with a Rosemary and Co ivory short flat brush. So here we go. There is a blob form masking her hand here. And since this is so dark, I might use it to break up some of the other spaces that I've got, which is just a little bit too regular. And that might suggest that some other kind of forms are going on in that part of the jungle. Just to make it a little bit more interesting. This one here. Try to randomize the shapes a little bit. Try to make it so that the creatures are integral. To the rest of the painting. So a little bit more darks here, scrub in. And this mix, while having a dark green appearance, is also thin enough to allow the black to influence it still. Okay, so the first of my foliage forms is a little bit lighter, but not as light as that. So these are long, tall grasses. reaching up towards the figure. And ideally the rigger is actually a good tool for this. So overpainting in one stroke the area that we've already painted, because I don't want to rub that area so much that the paint mixes too much. I do need a little bit of separation there though. So there's some yellow. The colours that I'm using, if we look at the palette cam, are cadmium yellow light, viridian, titanium white, cerulean blue hue, and French ultramarine. So let's try and get some long single stroke. And I'm using the pastel marks as a guide. They're going to get hidden very soon. Okay, now I'm happy with those. Let's bring it into the form a little bit. Because there is a sense in which the creatures are on, or the inhabitants are on the jungle and not actually in the jungle. So with this foreground layer, I hope to correct that and make sure that they're all well integrated. I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to continue off the picture plane with a few more. And I have enough paint left for some other branches, so some other leaf forms. Extend that one a little bit more. And extend that one a little bit more. And some more longer foliage forms here. So I think because the plant is growing in a long flowing way, that the best way to paint it is in a long flowing style. I'm running out of that paint mix. But I can already sense that, having approached this rather nervously, I'm now beginning to get the feel for painting in these last... hopefully this session will be my last session on this particular painting. So some more foliage forms, and hopefully they're going to be overlapping. Now what's interesting about this one, I have no red paint there. What's interesting about this mix is that this plant is outlined by a lovely yellow, but we don't want to go full yellow yet. We don't want to go completely yellow, so what I'll try and do maybe is see if I can use some more of that yellow there. And now, because the mix is so syrupy, it's a very juicy mix, that the synthetic sable synthetic mix of my hairs of my brush are able to mix it in quite well. It's lovely and creamy. So let's start outlining. And at this point, the chalk marks that I created should, or my pastel marks, should actually disappear. I'm trying to do these in as confident strokes as I can. So as to prevent, mixing with, on the surface. Mixing colours on the surface is perfectly acceptable, but it's more fitting with the art from the abstract expressionists than it has to do with surrealists like Rousseau and Maigret. So working a little bit more speedily because the juiciness of the paint and working wet on wet or wet and wet permits this painting. And I like this painting style. I like this because it feels like drawing. It has all the immediacy of drawing, and I'm quite comfortable when I draw. So, and again, by outlining, I can correct any errors, any perceived errors in the drawing. But I'm quite happy with that. She looks as if she's actually in the forest now. My mix is about 50-50 tap water and water-soluble linseed oil from the Winsor & Newton Artisan range. It's okay. Maybe I can go in with that dark again and create other kind of, suggest other kind of foliage forms here around her. To make sure that she's incorporated into the jungle. Place this new green in amongst all the other greens to create variety and contrast and perceived complexity. In fact, there I'm just wiping off the excess off the brush. Okay, so that itself suggests a foliage form. I'll just scrape back and see if I can make a little bit more of the foliage. Yeah. Knowing that I can come back to that. Okay, I have blue. This is cerulean blue hue, and what I'm trying to do is mix up different greens so that they are visually discrete. I've got yellow at the centre because in the foreground I want my painting to be the warmest. So this is the warmest part of the painting. So this leaf occludes, blocks out the other leaves. To create a little bit of distinction, I'm making them broader, and that creates a little bit more of a kind of visual texture, and hopefully a different rhythm to the work. I need to mix up more of that paint. I feel I'm running out already. Let's try. Yep, it's a match. So that it reads very, very differently from the rest of the foliage. So they have different characteristics. They read differently. They've got different tempo. They've got different intensity. Just different characteristics to help us distinguish each separate item from the complexity of what's going on around. This one's changing direction, and that also creates a little bit of visual interest. Okay, now I should have an embossing tool to help me separate out my different items, and that's okay. Let's go on slightly yellower tips. Back into the yellow, and this time a nice mix with French ultramarine blue. And I'll need to see a little bit of white. I'll give it chalkiness, that's fine. It is visually different from what's gone before. But is it dark enough? Okay. Now, these flower forms are more teardrop shaped. And I don't feel there's enough of a difference between those and the ones before, so let's make it a lot darker. And see if that helps. More teardrop forms. I'll try some neat blue in there to bring that one back. And my drawing's just a guide at this stage. I'm not afraid to alter the drawing I confess I was really nervous before I started this to see what was, how I would approach it, how successful it would be. And I needn't have worried because it's quite good fun. Especially when the paint is as thick as it is right now and syrupy. It's just a joy to use. So for those of you that might be watching this one as the first one, I'm using Artisan, Winsor & Newton Artisan water mixable, water soluble oil paint. And through the stem, suggest some connections. And because I enjoyed using the yellow so much, I may actually add in some other kind of details. To help the viewer see the shapes and the complexity. I speak about legibility quite a lot, so it's to make it quite legible. Some chalkiness. Put some sheen on some of the leaves. And there we go. It's quite fun. So now I have to make yet another green. So what's missing from my mix is some dirt. So something to dampen down the colours a little bit. And at this stage I want to use something warm. So instead of using like burnt umber or raw umber, yellow ochre is a good earth colour to use. This will give the colours a different dimension. Let's see what happens when we introduce this dark colour into here. Yep, we get a very dull. Let's see if we can bring that up a little bit. Okay, quite a natural green colour. Yellow ochre and black make a very satisfying olive colour. So let's make this more workable with the addition of my medium. And to create a different rhythm, a different tempo, a different frequency of mark making, these leaves, let's extend that out a little bit. These leaves are very long and thin, and they curve off at the end. So they read more like a grass. With a tip that curves over. Let's put a little bit of ripple into the make the lines a little bit more organic. I have to be careful that I don't become too mathematical. There, I'm deliberately trying to mix up the shape a little bit. Go back in with my colour there, try not to interfere with it too much. We don't want mixing on the surface, not at this moment. Okay, let's have 3 close together. And maybe in an overlapping fashion. Still looping, still curving down. So it's amazing how the eye detects, these kind of differences in form and frequency and the way that the marks are made. I think I might want a little bit of chalkiness in there to show that that one's on top. Oh, just a little highlight. Yeah, I'm a complete convert to the water-soluble oil paints. It's taken a little while to get confident with them, but they're very, very forgiving indeed. Okay, there's a little bit of resist there with the mix that I had for the guitar soundboard, which was used with titanium, made with titanium white. So I have heard that painting on top of titanium white can sometimes be a little bit problematic. So what I want to do here is incorporate the snake, but I want to do it in such a way that its form is not obfuscated, confused, obscured. These grasses are quite fun. And I did actually make a point of studying green, so I made a project specifically on green so that I could feel a lot more comfortable with a colour that causes me a lot of concern. Up until recently, I would say that green was my nemesis colour, and that I would overdo my greens and just not use them correctly, just overdo it. So this project is building upon successes and confidence and growth. What happens if we mix French ultramarine with viridian, so 2 darks, because my last mix was a nice kind of satin green version. Bring in some white, titanium white, to give a kind of chalkiness, and then some of the delicious yellow. So a bit more, okay, a little bit of yellow ochre. give a different green. And these are a lot more solid. These are more solid forms. So let's just be confident and go for it. Very strong grassy forms. I could even get away with a little bit more yellow in that mix. And a bit more white. So, nice broad strokes. And of course the more yellow in the mix is helping to sing out against that the colour of the snake. So I can make these kind of palmate and then sort of ribbed, almost like seaweeds, into that space there. Right, and then rippling down back into the colour again to avoid sullying. You don't want to overwork an area. But look at how opaque the colour goes down and just immediately covers up the snake. That's some nice ribbing there on that particular one. Okay, can I get one to cut across here? Spells out like a almost like a cobra itself, and then kind of ribbed seed shape. And that allows us to see the snake's head, which is an important detail for me. Yeah. So I've journeyed from being quite anxious about this task to finding it actually really enjoyable. You will notice from my narration that I'm quite tired. I'm losing my concentration. My channel is called Guitar Therapy, so every now and again I have to acknowledge that I am exhausted with ME, and that does affect my concentration levels. But the painting is itself is just so therapeutic. The crossover there. Let's show which is on top. Oop. Okay, and I think a few more just to fill out the side of the page. A little bit more yellow ochre to help them wither. Help it to wither away. And then if I don't recharge the brush, the black comes through and influences it a little bit more, and you get quite interesting shapes and forms. That's quite good. Now in Rousseau's original, there is a lovely little figure. If I can just increase this a little bit more so that I can see it, which is almost the bright yellow. This one it reminds me a little bit of a piano keyboard. So there is it, quite near the figure. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we need something like that over here as well. 1, 2, 3, 5. And again, that reads differently from all the other forms and textures that are around about it. And again, 1, 2, 3 here. So it's a figure that I quite like, and I'm just going to outline them in this Viridian and French ultramarine blue mix, and give them, oh, I need to go a lot darker than that. Okay, that's more dark. I wonder if we can get away with just straight blue. I'm beginning to suspect that any mark making with green would give a successful or fairly successful result. I'm not happy with how it's outlined. It's not outlining great. So the only other thing I can do is, instead of going dark, I can go light. So there's a kind of triangular point before the kind of wedge shape, like so. But what I'll do is I'll just bring that out with white. Another thing I can do to add even more visual interest and texture into the work is to make some of the leaves variegated. So I'm not actually sure if I need that. Okay, that blue should sing out. That's a little bit better. Recharging the brush quite a lot, because as I'm laying down paint, I'm also picking up paint. So I want to try and keep the marks fairly clean. Although the paint here is so thickly applied, it's very difficult not for it to get contaminated, for want of a better expression. I can imagine that Rousseau would have painted with a little bit more abandon like this because he was working on such a large scale. And I am very stingy with paint typically, so I can see from working in this way that when the paint is really juicy, it's very syrupy, and the colours can blend into each other quite nicely. And so I suspect that a lot of the mark making that Rousseau has made, some of the blending on the trees and things, was done with a much thicker application of paint than I'm using. But at the moment I'm just reserving, my boldest marks for the final phase of the painting. I wanted to put a little bit of chalky sheen on these ones here, but I've kind of overdone it. So a little bit of blending is needed. Just knock it back a little bit. So there's an idea that some light has caught on them because they're bending. I wanted to create a little bit of form in those ones, a little bit of gloss, a little bit of sheen on them. And that is it. One day after the deadline, but it's finished for the studio practice that I do. I may actually make some other alterations to it with a view to using it in a commercial way. But that is this episode finished. That's this project brought to an end, and I feel I've learned a lot from Rousseau, and I think that's it. It's time to say bye-bye and go on to a new project for June. And what I want to do is try and work a lot more speedily, like I did at the bottom here, when I was working with it in a much more carefree way. So I want to do lots of smaller paintings in a much faster way, rather than taking a whole month to finish a project. So let's see what happens. Thank you for watching this. Thank you for joining me again in another installment of my studio art practice. I hope you found something that was of interest to you and something that inspires you to experiment with your own creativity wherever you happen to be. Thanks now, bye.